What a great time we're having today, celebrating the Lord. And we've been moving through the Bible on Sunday morning, starting in Genesis, moving through the New Testament. And the past few weeks, we've talked about the way that Paul had communicated to his spiritual son, Timothy. In 1 Timothy, I just want to reflect for a moment. In 1 Timothy, he started out by sharing his story with Timothy as a way to encourage him. 1 Timothy is a letter about encouraging Timothy. Timothy is serving in a leadership role, and Paul, as his spiritual father, wants to send him a letter of encouragement. A part of that encouragement was sharing his story. We talked about how powerful it is and how important it is for us to be willing to share our story. We're blessed that we have another letter from Paul to Timothy, 2 Timothy, a letter that comes later, obviously, and what's interesting about that is there's also an element of story in 2 Timothy, in this next letter. When you look at the first chapter of 2 Timothy, this time Paul shares a story, but he's not sharing his own story with Timothy. He's reminding Timothy of his story. Here's what I'm talking about. Check out verse 3 and then following through verse 7. Paul says, I thank God whom I serve with a pure conscience, as my forefathers did, as without ceasing I remember you in my prayers day and night, greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I might be filled with joy when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you. Listen carefully to this next phrase, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded is in you also. Therefore I remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I want to just say a word this morning as we have celebrated Raymond and Imogene and a special day, and their family. And as you listened earlier, as the names of the family members were shared and family introduced family, I want to just remind you of something in Scripture. Names are important. And when Paul wrote to Timothy and included a story of encouragement, he called out his mother by name and his grandmother, as he identified Lois and Eunice by name. He called out family members by name as a part of Timothy's story to encourage him. And this morning we've done a little bit of that. It's Family Sunday for us at Heritage, and we're trying to emphasize the importance of families growing together, having our children in the service this morning, having them participate, and then this morning especially having family members of the Hensley family participate in the service. Because what Paul teaches us in this is that it becomes an encouragement, not just to Timothy, but here we are 2,000 years later reading about Timothy's family and drawing encouragement from that. So this morning, what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite Anthony Hensley to come up, and I just want to give the brother some props. Father of twins, plus one, and he's here. And their clothes matched. Man, I'm just saying. I just want to give you some props, brother. So how is life?
Frazzled.
Frazzled. Grab
Frazzled.
grab your microphone here, and we're glad to have you,
Hello,
Anthony.
Hello.
Good to go. I invited Anthony to come, one, because I had the opportunity to read some very powerful words, testimony from his life and what God's been doing. So I asked him to share a little bit of his story with us. So I'm going to ask him a few questions, and you're going to be encouraged this morning. I know, as Anthony shares some things from his heart, some things that God's been doing in his life, but we celebrate with you today, Anthony. So glad you could join us at Heritage. The first thing that I want to ask you is, can you give an example? I see you as a little bit of a Timothy here, where God has called you out, and you recognize that he wanted you to stir up the gift, step out in faith, and do something for him. Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I can. Before I start, I'm not a stage guy like the rest of my family is. Most of my family is. My dad, his brothers, my cousins. so this is not the way I roll. But I did it because, well, for one, Dad asked me to do it, and then I'm mad at him, and I'm really mad at you for agreeing to that.
I take that.
But I did it, like Joel said just a minute ago, to honor my God. But I also did it to honor my mama and papa. I mean, without them, I'm not supposed to get emotional. Without them, I wouldn't be standing here, and I know most of those people there in the back corner, we wouldn't be here. So I honor you, Mama and Papa, for raising my dad and his brothers and sisters to be godly people. And again, that legacy that we've talked about all morning. So thank you so much. I love you very much. So I had to get that out.
Yes.
So back to the example. Recently, a couple of years ago, my wife and I had a chance to go to Romania on a mission trip. And I'm going to get emotional here too, because it's still really close to my heart. But while we were there, we went over there to help a missionary that my church, we live in Chattanooga, and we support a missionary that has lived in Romania now for 7 or 8 years. And we had an opportunity to be a team, go on a team, short-term mission, and to help the missionary there. While we were there to build a playground for the kids in a very poor village outside of a city called Sibiu. The little name of the town is Hozman. And third world type conditions, utter poverty. You don't really know what it looks like and how it affects you until you see it with your own eyes and you smell it and you hear it. But while we were there building the playground for the kids there in the village, we got to know this family. His name was Nico, and his wife's name was Laura, and they had 4 kids as well. And as we got to know, that's them there. They had 4 children, and as we got to know them, we couldn't speak their language, but the pastor that we were working with there in Hozman told us a little bit about Nico and Laura, and the conditions they lived in. Later that week, they invited us over to their 12 by 12 room where their entire family lived. I mean, that's where they all slept there, they all ate there. That was their place to live. And the pastor that we were working with in the local village told us that he had a plot of land that had become available. And I don't know, he just happened to tell us that. And I really felt God nudging my heart to say, you can make a difference here. You can do this. And so I talked to my wife, Tinsley, whom again isn't here this morning, but we both agreed that it was a God thing, and we were supposed to step out in faith and purchase this land for Nico and Laura as a 1/4 acre. It was something that we could do, and we felt like, again, that God called us to do that. So we thought, well, worst case scenario, I mean, they can use the land to plant crops so they can feed their family. We didn't know really what else they could do with the land, but we just felt like God calling us to step out and purchase that land for that family. So that's kind of how we got started.
How did God provide in that situation moving forward?
Well, moving forward, again, the transaction took place. They had this land, and again, they don't really have any money to do anything with it. The missionary, he took a tractor out there and helped them plant some crops. But it went from there. When I was back in the States here, I felt God really saying it's not over. That's just the beginning. I want you to put a team of guys together and raise money and go back over there and build them a house on that land. And so, that's what I did.
Yes. I think we have a picture of the house, actually.
We have it. Yeah, there's the house that we built for them. So, and again, this is not about how great I am or how I always listen to what God is calling me to do. But he really urged me to step out, and I could have easily said no. There's too many things that can go wrong. I'm traveling halfway around the world with a team of 7 other men. It could rain for 10 days, and we get nothing done.
Yes.
You know, we the finances. I mean, you know, you have this list of fears that immediately pop in your head as to why you can't do something, why I can't do this, why I can't, you know, God, I'm not the right guy for this, God. You got the wrong guy, you know. And I think we've all been there if we're honest with ourselves. It doesn't have to be a trip around the world building a house for a family. I mean, it can be talking to the guy on the corner. It can be, you know, picking up the phone and calling that estranged son or daughter. I mean, it can be any of those things where God or the Holy Spirit is nudging us to act on His behalf. And you know, we have to make that choice to say, yes, I'm going to do it, or no, I'm not going to do it.
I think that's a great word of encouragement, especially for some of our young people that are in the service here today. That and I know when you shared your testimony, and I read a portion of your testimony, you referred to the fact that God's love, His perfect love, casts out fear. And I love the contrast between God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. Can you talk a little bit about the love that God gave you when you traveled and you made the journey all the way over across the ocean?
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the love that He gave you? Because I can sense that.
I think you know, God gives us maybe a general love for mankind, right? But He's also a very relational God. He's made us to be in relationship. He's in relationship with Himself, the Trinity, right? I can't explain that, but that's the way it is. And he wants us to have a relationship with Him, but He also wants us to have a relationship with each other. And I think, you know, again, going over there to serve those people, we didn't know anybody over there except the missionary. So it was an opportunity to go serve and love people. But I think the big difference is when you say yes and you step out and you do that thing that God's calling you to do, whatever that is, you get a chance to put a face with the need, right? So when we got to know these people, that's when my heart really, they're people, they're human beings. They may live in Romania. They may live next door. They may live a block over. But when you make yourself available to be relational with people, to get to know people, to get to know their need, what do they need, and how can I act? How can I move to meet that need? You know, God's given us resources to meet those needs. I mean, we don't have to hear from Him every time to say, yeah, you need to do that. I mean, He's called us already to make a difference, to make changes in the world. And we got the resources to do it, you know? So I think the relational aspect of it, when you really, again, I think He puts those people in your path, and He also, if you follow Him and if you're willing to step out, I think that's part of His plan, is to get to know people on a one-on-one, you know, basis, because then and only then can you really meet that particular need. You know what I'm saying?
I sure do.
And I feel like I'm rambling, and I feel like I'm making no sense.
You're making perfect sense. And I know your story enough to know that also God met with you and provided what was needed to accomplish what you did. Not just through you individually, but also through the resources and the skills and the team and the opportunity, the lot, the supplies, everything met the need just according to God's plan.
Yeah, he did amazing things, and I think there's so many things I want to say, and I don't know how you do this, but again, until you make that step, until you make that commitment to say, I'm going to follow you, God, as to where you're leading me, whatever that may be, it's going to look different for all of us. We all have different gifts, and we can excuse it away with fears. We can let fear cage us and not be impactful and not make a difference in the world. But what amazed me about that trip and some other things that I've experienced since then is you realize what an unbelievable and awesome God that we serve. He's out there in the world working, and you're not going to experience him sitting on the couch, either literally or figuratively. You're going to meet him out there where he's working in the lost and in the hurting, in the poor. That's where God is working. And when you make yourself available to go to join him in the work he's already doing, I mean, he did amazing things for us on that trip. I mean, he supplied the roofing material, and we didn't have that bought. We had no idea where that was coming from. We had a pastor that was in the neighboring village came by and said, "Hey, I've got some leftover roofing material," the day that we needed it. I mean, we had, we had. Again, it could have rained the whole time. We had 8 straight days of just beautiful sunny weather. And we wouldn't have been able to get that done working in the rain. There's no way. Those 2 windows there that you see in the front of the house, we had bought, there's 2 windows on each end that we had the money to buy, and they were tiny. They were probably half that size, maybe a quarter that size. And somebody, again, there was a pastor, maybe even the same guy that was building a house or was destroying a house or something. I can't remember how the windows came. It's been a couple of years ago, but those windows were donated to us, and they were perfect. There was not a scratch on them. I mean, the block that we had left over, I mean, I literally saw the block that we used to build that house. The missionary and the pastor that we were working with, he used to be a building contractor. And he used a computer program to calculate all the materials because he wanted to make sure the money that we raised went as far as it was going to go with the materials. So when we got done with that house, we had like 200 block left over. And we were like, how in the world do we have 200 block left over? I mean, your computer program was supposed to tell us exactly what we needed, maybe with a little left over. But 200 block, I mean, so what do we do with that? We met another guy that helped us that week that my team got to know. The guys that were on my team, they got to know another gentleman who was just as poor as the guy that we were helping. So we used that block to start building him a house with. And he came to know Jesus through that experience. That's what it's all about. It's not to say we do these awesome things, but it's to love on people. And I think getting back to what I was trying to say is God shows up when you make yourself available. You ask, where's God? I've asked that question, where are you, God? I haven't heard your voice in a long time. He's out there, and he's prepared. I think it's Ephesians 2:10 where it says he's prepared in advance the works that we're to do. So he's already there. I mean, he was already in Romania. He had already made the way. He knew exactly what was going to happen before we even went. And I was worried about, oh man, how are we going to get there? How am I going to raise the money? What's the weather going to be like? What's going to happen if this? What's going to happen if that? What's going to happen if this? If. And God was already there. So that's my challenge to you guys. I mean, again, he's really taken me to this point the last couple of years is get out of your fears. Don't be afraid of what people might think about you or what they might say about you, or it's not going to work out like you want it to.
Right.
You've got these preconceived notions in your head. It's got to work out this way or this way. God doesn't work that way. He just wants us to be committed and faithful and step out there. And I guarantee he's going to show up, and he's going to show up in ways that's going to blow your mind. So I don't know.
That's perfect. How many of you have you heard something this morning that's encouraged you? Come on. Say thank you. Thank the Lord. Thank the Lord. Awesome God. Thank you. I hope you don't stay mad at me.
No. Not
just for a little while.
maybe a couple months.
Yeah. I love the fact that what you shared, Anthony, was to remind us sometimes we feel like we have to have it all together before we can do something for God. You felt that way, haven't you? You got to have it. You have to know what's going to happen exactly. You have to know. I was reading just this past week where it says God calls, we follow. What we want is for God to give us all the details. God doesn't always do that. Matter of fact, in my life, he rarely does that. but then he shows up in amazing ways and provides in amazing ways. I'd like to ask you to do something as we close our time together here this morning. And certainly, Anthony, I had in my notes to quote Ephesians 2 and talk about how God has prepared us in advance for good works. He has good things planned for our life in advance. I believe that about every person that is here this morning. I do. I'm convinced of that. And I'd like to ask you to do something. Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy 1, he said that there's a gift in you, and he even mentions the fact that I laid hands on you. Did you catch that part? The faith was in your mother and your grandmother, and there's a gift that's in you that you need to stir up that was given. I laid hands on you. I want to ask you to do something. It may be a little uncomfortable for you, but Anthony's already mad at me, so I might as well make a few more people mad if it's uncomfortable. Here's what I want you to do very seriously. I want us to stand up. I want you to lay a hand on someone around you. We're gonna pray today. And just find someone you can reach. If it's a family member, awesome. If it's not, just find someone you can reach. Lay a hand on them. And we're going to pray. And I'm going to ask you to just join with me in this prayer. Every person, the person you have a hand on right now, is gifted. I believe by God there's something within that person that God desires to bring out. Good works He's intended for us to do in advance of actually doing them. So I want us to close with this prayer today.